guys, today we're gonna make unit 6.6, exercise 6.6 and unit 1, which is the pineapple and carrot muffins. So it is a really easy muffins. Here is all the ingredient in front of me, all-purpose flour, and then I kind of combine the salt, baking powder, and baking soda into one small plate. And then again, here is the cinnamon powder, ginger powder, and nutmeg powder, and sugar. So vanilla, eggs, pineapple, buttermilk, canola oil, and then here is some dried fruits. So according to the recipe, we will mix the first 8 ingredients together in a large bowl. So which is flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. Just everything in, and some spices, and the sugar. So we'll just kind of let them to mix together. So then we put them on the side and then we prepare for the second bowl. So the second bowl contains eggs. This is half eggs because we are cutting the recipe into half. Buttermilk, a little bit of vanilla, which is 1 ml. And 25 ml of the canola oil. Then we kind of mix them together, and then they put in the pineapples. So the pineapples are from the can, and then in the recipe it said dried. That means you do not want to have the water from the can into your muffins. That will make your muffins extra white, so then that is not good. So that is the mixtures for the second bowl. Now we're gonna pour this one into the flour mixtures. Here we go, and then we just kind of mix them together. So this recipe does not have any water because the moisture from the pineapple and from the buttermilk and also the eggs is enough for the mixtures to form. So now we can add the fruits in here. We have some raisins, shredded carrots, and chopped pecans. So again, we just mix them together. So now it's done. Then we just need to scoop them into the muffin cups. And then we're just gonna scoop the mixtures into each cups. So do not fill the cups all the way on the up to the top, because during the baking the muffins actually gonna raise up a little bit. So now all the muffins are in the cups, and I make a half recipe which gives me around 10 muffins. So if you make a full recipe, and you will probably have 15 to 20. And then now I hope you remember this. This is from the lab 2, which is the dried banana chips. So then we're gonna use it in this lab. We will just put the dried banana chips on top of the muffin. I'd like to put 3 of them. We kind of press it, but you don't have to press it all the way down into the mixture. Just make sure they are staying together. Okay, it has just enough banana chips to put into the muffins, and now it's ready. And then we can just put them into the oven. The oven is preheated to 200 degrees, and then we will bake them into the oven for around 10 minutes. and when it's ready, we're gonna check. We will check the temperature, and then we will see. So to checking if it is ready, you can either check the temperature, or you can use a toothpick to stick it in and in the middle of the muffin like that, and you leave it out. You see there's still some batter sticking on the toothpicks compared with a new one. So that means the muffin is not ready. So we will give it another 5 minutes, and then we will check it again. So now it's after another 5 minutes baking. I think the muffin is ready. So let's check. So same process. We have a toothpicks, and then we just stick into the muffins and see if there's any batter on the toothpicks. So see, it is clear. Just in case, we can check 1 or 2 more. Here's 1 more. Again, it's really clear. And maybe this one. So see, that is very clear. Then that means the muffin is done, and we can enjoy it. Okay, so now we are doing exercise 6.4, which is the Texas beef wraps. And today we are only gonna do the tortillas for the beef wraps, because we're gonna do the Texas beef in the meat lab, which is on the lab 8. So now we have all the ingredients for the flour tortillas. So all-purpose flour, shortenings, salt, and baking powder, and warm water. So according to the recipe, we just put the salt and baking soda together in here. And then we're gonna put the shortenings in. So we will use the caster to do like that until the flour forms like small crumbs. This is gonna take some time, so be patient. Okay, so as you can see here, the small crumbs formed, and then we will pour the warm water and just warm it up with the microwave, and pour the warm water directly into the flour. And you can use a fork or whatever tool you're comfortable with to mix the flour together and then let them to form a dough. So if you don't like to use your hand, you can cover your hand with gloves, or you can keep using the forks or whatever tools you want. So the dough is a little bit sticky because the warm water actually let the shortening to melt. Yeah, I think the dough is ready, and as you can see the texture, it is very soft compared with the regular bread dough. It's really soft, but it's not gonna stick on your hand. So if your dough is sticking on your hand, so somehow you may add too much water. So now the dough is like that, and we will divide them into 4 pieces, because again we cut this recipe into half. So the original recipe said divided to 8 little pieces, but then here we only have half our recipe, so we will only gonna do 4. So here is 1 cut. So after you cut it, you roll them into a bowl. Just put them back into the bowl I used before. So then you cover them with the plastic wraps and then let them to sit in the room temperature for 30 minutes. So now it's after 30 minutes resting. The dough is here. It doesn't raise up because there's no yeast in here. And now we will just take one, and then we will cover the rest to make sure they are hydrated. And this dough gonna be a little bit sticky, so be careful when you roll them. You actually can sprinkle some flour on the tabletop, so prevent it to be stick on the table. And also use some flour to dust your roller as well. That also helps. So you just roll them to a 25 centimeters circle, and everybody has their own way to roll the dough. So yeah, you don't have to follow my way, but so yeah, it's around 25 centimeters. And here's one dough, and then we will use the wax paper or the parchment paper. We'll put the dough on the paper, just making sure they are not sticking on the surface or anywhere they shouldn't be. Okay, so now let's begin to cook the tortillas. So do not rush off. Like I put wax paper under each of the tortillas, so just like prevent them to be sticking with each other. And now we will just put the tortillas into a skillet, and I didn't put any oil in the skillet because the tortilla itself already has shortening in it, so there's enough fat for them to not stick on the pan. So I will just pour them in. So like they cook about 2 minutes on each side, or like you can adjust. If you see that they are already turning brown, you can just flip it even though it's not 2 minutes. Just checking frequently when you are cooking them. As you can see, the textures begin to change in here. Oops. And there's some bubbles. It's definitely less than 2 minutes, and then I already see the brown color on this side, so I will just flip it over. There's a nice bubble in the middle, and yes, I think now it's ready. And we will put them back on the wax paper again, because later we actually gonna freeze them, and we will use them in the lab 8.
Okay, so this is exercise 6.6, unit 3. This is the 3-grain brown bread. So this bread is leavened using baking powder and not yeast, so that's going to be really important. With this recipe as well, the order of how we do things is pretty significant to make sure that the baking powder can do its job properly. So we're going to be very careful about following the recipe and keeping our liquids and our wets, so our liquids and our dries, very separate. So the first step is to add the oil with the brown sugar, and I'm going to mix those together to make sure that they're fully incorporated. So if your brown sugar has chunks like this one does, it's important to break them up as you can. And the next wet ingredient is to add 2 eggs. And if you get any shell, you can always just pick it out of your batter there, just like that. Perfect. Oh my goodness. Good things. Okay. So we'll mix those eggs in, as well as trying to get the last of those brown sugar lumps out, if that's possible. Well, we're gonna leave it like that for now. So those are our wet ingredients. And then we're gonna move on to our dry ingredients, which I'll actually add to a separate bowl here. So we have our whole wheat flour, can go in, our all-purpose flour, as well as some oats and some rye flour. To this mixture, we're also going to add some baking soda, and again, this is the double action baking soda, as well as some salt. And just gonna mix this together. as well. This is just to make sure that everything is evenly distributed throughout throughout the dry ingredients here. Now you may have noticed that we've left out one ingredient, and that's the buttermilk, and that's going in separately to either the wet or the dry. And that's important because buttermilk is acting as the acid in this recipe, which is required for baking powder to act as a leavening agent. Okay, so the recipe says to add our dry ingredients in 3 additions and then have 2 additions of buttermilk as well. So we're going to alternate from our dry ingredients to our buttermilk addition. So I'm going to add 1/3 of our dries, and I'm going to mix that in. And now that that's fairly mixed together, I'm going to add half of the buttermilk. Okay, and we're going to go in with our next 1/3 of the dry ingredients. Mix those in. We're trying not to overmix and just kind of mix as much as we need to incorporate, just so that the bread won't be tough in the end. I'm going to go in with the last of our buttermilk here. That's looking pretty good, so I'm going to add the rest of the dry ingredients. And again, I'm trying not to overmix and mix just enough to make sure that everything is equally distributed. I may actually go and use my hands just because it's getting a bit tough to use with just a spoon. It looks like we're almost there. It's getting pretty sticky, and almost all of the flour is incorporated. There's just a little bit at the bottom there. Okay, and that looks, oh, there's just a little bit there at the bottom still. Let's see if we can get it, the last of it in there. Now again, trying to be cautious of overmixing, I might just call it at that. We've got pretty much all the flour from the bottom. I'm going to try and again get some of this off my hands here. So this is going to be enough dough to make 2 loaves, and we've prepared 2 loaf pans that are already greased. So I'm going to divide this into 2. Try and spread it around in the pan. Now you can already see some of the action of the baking powder taking place, which is cool. Just gonna spread that out. So now that these are in the pans, they'll go into the oven for about 55 to 60 minutes. At 350, and we'll check on them maybe at about 45 just to see how they're doing. We're using a toothpick, and yeah, we'll see how they turn out. So it's been just over an hour on our brown bread, so I'm going to take it out of the oven and take a look. It's turned nice and brown in color, and I'm just going to do a toothpick tester just to see what it's looking like. So as you can see, it's coming off totally dry, so that's great. I'm going to test another side just to see, make sure it's all the way through. Actually, maybe I'll go right in the middle here. And again, that one looks totally dry. So that's great, so it looks all done. So it has a pretty rough exterior, but that's from our efforts to not mix it too much. And it's definitely turned a nice brown color, so that's great as well. Here's the second one. And other than that, they look great.
Okay, this is exercise 6.6, unit 4, the brown butter soda bread. The first step for making this bread is to brown the butter. So I have a little bit of butter on a saucepan, and I'm going to keep stirring it and let it melt, and then it's going to change color to golden brown, so that should take about 3 minutes. So the butter has melted, and it was getting pretty foamy, and now it's starting to bubble, and I think the color is going to change soon. So we're going from a pale yellow to a bit of a brown, golden brown. Okay, it's kind of hard to see the change in color because it's all foamy up at the top, but if I kind of pull underneath, you can see that it has changed color and it's looking like a light brown. So I'm going to take that off the heat, and then I'm going to bring it to my workstation. Okay, so I'm going to get my dry ingredients all mixed together. So I have all-purpose flour, and I'm also going to add some oats and a bit of sugar. We have some fresh rosemary that I sliced up. And then in here we have double-acting baking powder, we have baking soda, we have salt, and we have pepper. So I'm just going to mix those up to incorporate it. And then for the next step, I'm going to add the wet ingredients. So I have buttermilk, and then our browned butter, and you can see the color has changed quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going to use a fork just to kind of bring this together. I'm trying to get the dry ingredients moistened, but then I'm going to turn it out on the bench and continue mixing it that way. Okay, so I'm just going to knead it until it forms a dough and is sticking together. And I have some extra flour here in case I need it, in case the dough is too sticky. Okay, so this is looking like a pretty shaggy ball, but that is what I want. And then I'm going to gently knead it just about 7 turns. I don't want to over knead this. I think we'll stop there. And then I'm just going to cut this in half. We're going to get 2 loaves out of this recipe. And I'm going to form each of these halves into a ball, the best we can. I'm liking that. Okay, I'm going to gently flatten these. That will ensure an even baking time. This pan is ungreased. There's enough fat going on in the recipe that it doesn't need to be greased. Okay, so we've got those 2 on the pan, and my next 2 steps are to just brush some egg white on the top. So I'm gonna save that egg yolk for later. And I've just got the egg white here. Brush it all over the top. This often helps for a nice shiny coat, and it helps with the browning. Okay, and these loaves we actually sprinkle with a little bit of black pepper. So I won't do too much, try to keep it moderate. And then the last step is to take a sharp knife. I'm going to cut an X in the top. I'm going to do it about 2 centimeters deep. Okay, so these are ready to go in the oven. I've preheated it to 375 and it will take about 45 minutes in the oven. So this is the finished brown butter soda bread, and to test for doneness you just use a toothpick right into the middle and it's coming out clean, so that means that it's finished. And you can see that it's mostly maintained its shape, and it did get a little bit of a cut along those lines that we cut on the top with our knife. The bottom is a nice golden brown.